Alright, guys, I'm actually really proud of this paper. It's for my Latino studies. We're learning about diaspora and the impact it's had on Latino communities. So I'm going to read my final paper because I feel like it's very important that we vocalize this and express it out. So I'm gonna read it. Okay, so my name is Ariela Zubia, and I'll be reading my final paper. I was basically comparing and contrasting the Chicano civil rights movement, the Chicano power movement, and the Puerto Rican civil rights movement. Let me begin. The battle for liberation and civil rights has been a tumultuous one for the Latino community. The two most prominent battles have been within the Chicano power movement and the Puerto Rican civil rights movement. These two groups have similarities but fundamental differences that distinguish the two communities and their struggle for visibility and liberation against a nation that was established to benefit and progress white America. To know the Latino struggle means to learn the history of why these groups felt the need to liberate themselves, understand the present issues that affect the community, especially because these groups are still disadvantaged, and progress, which we hold these truths to be self evident, happens slowly. It's also important to note how these communities are surviving and growing today, seeing as the United States still carries a lot of its racist ideologies. Puerto Rico's past is full of devastation and separation. In 1433, Columbus discovered, with air quotes, San Juan Bautista, but called the port Puerto Rico, later switching the names. The indigenous presence consisted of the Taino, Arawak, and the Carib tribes. African diaspora later shifted people to Puerto Rico, resulting in a mulatto community, which is best characterized as a black and Mexican community. These classifications were invented by the Spanish to categorize people with different physical characteristics and the ingrained racist ideologies that connects darker skin tones to lower class values and negative connotation. After much abuse, there was a slave rebellion, notably called the Grito de Lares, which was a slave rebellion in 1868. Turning the paper, trying to free itself from Spanish control. Although the revolt failed to achieve its main objective, Spain granted more autonomy to the island until America took control of the island in 1898. The fight for liberation began with Pedro Albizu Campos, who was the founder of the Nationalizing Independence Party in 1930. This is all from what I've learned, y'all, and was thrown in jail and spent over 25 years for a radical movement. Another clear example of U.S. intervention with minority groups to inhibit growth of in the communities. Now we navigate over the reasons of the immigration patterns of Puerto Ricans, as it is important to understand our past and present population and migration patterns. The Jones Act of 1917, which was 100 years ago, gave Puerto Ricans U.S. citizenship at birth. This was mainly to benefit from Puerto Rican labor use during several wars. Oscar Lopez Rivera helped found the Marxist Independent Party Armed Forces for National Liberation. He was thrown in jail, and Bill Clinton tried to pardon him, but he refused because they wouldn't allow the freedom of his comrades. Now on to the founder of the modern Puerto Rican Popular Democratic Party, Luis Munoz Marin. He was the first governor of Puerto Rico, office for 16 years, and brought industrialization to the island and fought for Puerto Rico's Commonwealth status. However, there were several challenges to Puerto Rican independence, and the majority of the reason is debt. What directly contributed to this was the Jones Act of 1920, stating that ships must pay tariffs, which meant the Puerto Rican citizens had to pay extra for food. Next, pharmaceutical companies, which were locked in a loophole that made them not have to pay taxes, from 1996 to 2006, there was a 10-year loophole causing tax to increase and minimum wage to decrease. This debt destroyed Puerto Rican's economy, causing many Puerto Ricans to migrate to the United States. On the east and southern coast, this resulted in backlash from activist groups, predominantly the Young Lords, which was a Puerto Rican activist organization that fought for better living conditions. Predominantly Puerto Rican and black communities that were also, not surprisingly, low income and disadvantaged compared to the more affluent and, again not surprisingly, white communities. The Young Lords were led by Chacha Jimenez, which fought for the improvement of living conditions throughout protests, demonstrations. They, along with a whole youth culture of activism, improved living conditions and gave Puerto Ricans a sense of pride, seeing as how Puerto Ricans have a past of rejection both from the mother island as well as in the United States. Through all this activism, Puerto Ricans were able to gain visibility and national progress as a community, though the wrongs from United States colonialism will never be erased nor forgotten. The Chicano Power movement began with the highlighting of indigenous cultures. To begin to love oneself is to see oneself and each other as beautiful and strong. There have been dominant issues with this ideology, mainly the adoption and assimilation of white Western European beauty standards. The first sign of revolt was starting to see oneself as beautiful with all your beautiful dark features, which was dominant especially with the Chicano youth culture. Their families left everything to raise their babies in a space safer than what they have experienced in their realities. While their grateful attitudes were extremely apparent, there were many inhibitors of the growth of the Chicano power movement. First was the inability to receive an education. The prime example was in Mendez versus Westminster in 1947, which was 7 years before Brown v. Board. In Orange County, access to education was denied to nearby schools because the school was labeled as white only. This case won, and this led to the desegregation of schools in California. Next, the Bracero program in 1942 saw only the strongest of Mexico to work in U.S. fields for them with a very low number of rights. Shortly following, Operation Wetback increased border enforcement, penalized people who employed Mexican workers, and increased hostility to send Mexicans back. This cruel injustice also resulted in the deportation of over 1 million workers, including U.S. citizens. Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, two revolutionary activists, fought for farm workers' rights, a revolutionary concept considering the United States did not consider the cruel working conditions of low sanitary environments and long working hours with little rights not a big deal. Chavez was influenced by Martin Luther King and his nonviolent forms of resistance, another example of brown and black unity working together to inspire growth and evoke change. Dolores Huerta fought tirelessly, even leaving her family for long periods of time to fight for farm workers' rights throughout the U.S. The United Farm Workers Association led to the establishment of rights for farm workers and immigrants overall. This led to a lot of Chicano empowerment and led to the establishment of activist groups, notably the Brown Berets, which like Puerto Rican activism, fought for the improvement of living conditions and access to education, healthcare, and visibility. One of the most notable successes from the Brown Beret Party, founded by David Sanchez, was the activism of farm worker struggles, educational reform. They fought against police brutality and anti-war activism. A proud accomplishment by the Brown Berets was the collaboration with the Black Panthers, two legendary forces fighting to improve the lives of the victims of the injustices caused by white supremacy. Both the Puerto Rican activism and Chicano power movements fought to increase visibility, representation, and empowerment. They fought to improve the world's perception of both of these communities that were being disadvantaged because they were extremely vulnerable to their new and changing environment. They provided perfect models of what a true American really is: children of immigrants, hardworking souls, loving hearts, and vibrant beauty. They both faced problems and internal structural damage. The Puerto Rican community was devastated by United States government intervention, particularly the FBI intrusion and sabotage. However, they had many successes, such as the embracement and empowerment of the Afro-Indigenous community, which now to this present day are still fighting for visibility, especially with the acceptance of its gay coalition and the acknowledgement of most of the victims of sexual abuse and hypersexualization are also the brown communities with the highest percentage of HIV or AIDS. This current generation has produced such a powerful influence for visibility and representation. They had role models and people to look up to, and that means a world of difference when from birth you are conditioned to feel lesser. The Chicano movement succeeded in empowering the Mexican American youth, leading to extreme amounts of activism. One of examples is me, and national pride, also known as Aztlan, which is the concept as a place of origin of the pre-Columbian Mexican civilizations, which also become a symbol for various Mexican nationalist and indigenous movements. Although the Brown Berets are still an active organization, heavy infiltration and spying from the United States government prevents from change occurring at a faster pace. Nevertheless, we are still present. Y'all, I'm about to kill this paper. You know I'm about to turn this in on Thursday. Wish me luck. I am so glad that I was able to teach y'all something because as much as some of y'all might know this front to back, I recently didn't know all of this. So the fact that I can enlighten y'all and y'all can teach others and we can all learn and grow together means the world to me. This semester has been nothing but growth and change, and I'm so proud of everything that I've accomplished, and I hope everyone has felt the same pride as well.